Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Subhanaka la fahma lana illa ma fahmtana innaka antal jawwadul karim. Rabbi zidni ilma. Allahumma inna na'udhu bika min hamazati shayateen wa na'udhu bika min Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una. وزدنا بفضلك وكرمك علما وعلما أما بعد. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His grace and mercy has given us this opportunity to reflect on some of His major bounties that He's granted us, bounties connected to our Iman, to our Islam, and particularly the bounty of the holy month of Ramadan. And as we've named our presentation for today, a gift of purification and rejuvenation. Now, this is a very vast topic and subject which we could go on for hours and hours, and volumes have actually been written on the subject. And we would do well to continue from now throughout the month of Ramadan and throughout the rest of our worldly existence to continue to be in contact with Ahlul Ilm, to continue this process of purification and rejuvenation, which is something that we need to do all the time. However, the holy month of Ramadan is such a time that it is a special servicing of our entire holistic being. And we're going to look at that in a little more detail. And technically, some doable takeaways that we can extract that will practically help us in our journey of purification and rejuvenation within this blessed month. So the month of Ramadan is a month of extensive virtues. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone knows their extent. And Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had mentioned to his Sahaba, radiallahu anhu, just a day before the actual beginning of the month of Ramadan, that a blessed month has now overcome us. We're now facing a month which is full of khair, it's full of barakat. The nafal ibadat, or these derogatory ibadat in acts of worship, are going to be counted as fard ibadat, and the fara'id, the obligatory activities which we are to perform in Ramadan, they're going to be multiplied 70 times, and every act of worship is going to increase its significance and its reward in status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this month is a night which is more valuable spiritually than the night of 1,000 months, or 1,000 months of nights. So it's a fantastic opportunity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has graciously given us this opportunity. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to, ask for barakat when Rajab used to overcome them, and Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa libna Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us in our Rajab and Sha'ban, and extend our lives so that we'll be able to benefit from the holy month of Ramadan. So alhamdulillah, we are about to enter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and afiyat, and give us the ability to observe this month as it should be observed. So the first thing we want to look at is, what is the objective of this whole process of fasting? This month of Ramadan, which the flagship, you could say, activity is fasting. So what is actually the objective of fasting? So the objective of fasting is actually to acquire taqwa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very explicitly explains this in the Holy Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitan. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O you who have believed, people of Iman, decreed upon you is fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made fasting obligatory upon you, just as He has made it obligatory on those people who came before you, before Muslims. The primary reason for which is that you may acquire taqwa, God consciousness, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Basically, to place a barrier, to set up a barrier between ourselves and the displeasure of our Rabb. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. This is basically the meaning of taqwa. Wiqaya. Wiqaya means to make a barrier. So making a barrier between ourselves and the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will only be done by proper behavior, proper belief and proper behavior, amal. And the acquisition of taqwa, or the operationally, when we fast in the month of Ramadan, so what happens, you know? So Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, rahimahullah, he has mentioned something very unique, I think. And he explains technically the process, you know, that the act of fasting in the month of Ramadan, what happens spiritually and physically. And so I'll share that with you from his book of Zad al-Ma'ad, which is commonly the portion which is commonly known as Tib al-Nabawi, which is actually a portion of that major work. So basically he says fasting has an amazing effect in protecting the outer limbs and the inner strength in defending them against corrupt and detrimental matter that can ruin them. In other words, fasting has this ability to protect the outer limbs and the inner strength. And it defends them against corrupt and detrimental things, elements, influencers that would corrupt them outwardly or inwardly. It also eliminates the bad elements, waste and prevent health. Now, this is true both spiritually and both physically. It eliminates, you know, bad elements of the heart and the mind. It also eliminates waste and toxins from the body. And so both of those activities, or both of those processes, they affect one another. So the purity of the spirit affects the purity of the body, and the purity of the body affects the purity of the spirit. So they're intrinsically connected, as it were. Fasting protects the health of the heart and the limbs and rejuvenates them from what the hands of passion and desire have stripped from them. Let's try and understand what he's saying here. So fasting protects the health of the heart and the limbs and rejuvenates them from what? From the fact that throughout, you know, our days and nights and throughout the course of the year, by our physical limbs, by the thoughts of our mind, by the notions that enter the evil notions, or the notions which are motivated by desire, which tend to corrupt our inner being and our outer being. So these hands of passion and desire, which have been really corrupting us inwardly and outwardly, physically and spiritually. So fasting protects this. It sort of eliminates that. It reduces that collateral damage, and moreover rejuvenates, and it reconstructs our spiritual and physical existence, so that we can sort of pressing reset, you know, so we get back in tune with and back in connection with our Creator and with the life of Ubudiyyah, of worship and service that we were created to perform. It is therefore the greatest facilitator of taqwa. So, you know, to basically, as taqwa has been very, very generally defined as acting upon the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and abstaining from the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we are, you know, purified inwardly and outwardly, so this fasting facilitates us in both of these dimensions, both spiritually and physically. So therefore, it is the greatest facilitator of taqwa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our tabib, He is our physician, and He knows best how we are to treat our maladies of the soul and the body, and what are the maladies that we have. Now, it's interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, opens up the doors of taqwa through the medium of fasting, and particularly in the month of Ramadan, when the very rebellious shayateen are also bound up and prevented from affecting us as they usually do in the course of the year, other than Ramadan. So the facilitation of taqwa also facilitates something further, and that is that this whole book, which the month of Ramadan is actually also the month of Quran. It is Shahr al-Siyam and Shahr al-Qiyam and Shahr al-Quran. And so the month of Quran is not simply a month of recitation of Quran and standing in long hours merely reciting the words, but moreover, reciting the words, connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and pondering over those meanings. Do they not ponder and reflect upon the verses of the Holy Quran, or are their hearts chained and locked from that understanding? So the doors of guidance, of understanding of the Holy Quran also are dependent upon taqwa, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very directly mentions in His Holy Book. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. In Surah Baqarah, this is the book, let there be no doubt about it, in which there is no doubt. It's a guidance for mankind, but not a guidance for all of mankind. يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Many people are misguided, apparently, by the Quran, although the Quran does not mean to misguide them, but because of the perversion of their minds and hearts, they themselves are misguided by falsely understanding or misinterpreting the Quran, being prevented from understanding its actual meaning. So only the people of taqwa will actually be the actual recipients of the guidance of the Holy Quran. This is extremely important. So the acquisition of taqwa, it is the basis of success, and it is also the basis of opening the doors of guidance of the Holy Quran. And the Holy Quran, which is a book which has been sent for guidance. And this, the entirety of the Holy Quran from the very beginning to the very end is a book of guidance to show us how to live as human beings in this life. And then what will be the reward for that and the outcome of that in this life and the next. However, not everybody who's fasting is going to acquire taqwa. Simply we stop our eating and we stop our, our fulfillment of the lower desires. So this is going to vouchsafe the acquisition of taqwa. So actually, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam mentions that there are many people who actually fast. There's quite a lot of people who have fast, and the only thing they get out of their fast is basically hunger and thirst. And many people are going to be standing in worship, and however, the only thing they get from their standing in worship, these long hours in prayer, etc., is the loss of sleep. Many of those fasting, their portion of their fast is merely hunger and thirst. And many of those holding nightly vigils, standing in the night, offering salat, long dua, etc., the portion of the vigils, what do they get out of it? What's their takeaway from that process? Is merely sleeplessness. May Allah save us from that. So this month is going to, pass 29 or 30 days for everyone, and it's going to be 24 hours for everyone. And the opportunity is also open for everyone, but not everyone will be a recipient of the guidance of this month and the blessings and the barakat, primarily the acquisition of taqwa, which is the primary objective. So we're going to have to observe this month in a particular way to become eligible recipients for this very special, favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala mentions that fasting is basically of three categories. One is the very bare minimum, which will absolve you from the obligation, which is to abstain from food and drink and sexual activity from the time of the beginning of dusk, from the time of beginning of fajr, beginning of daybreak, until the setting of the sun. And not much more than that. So this is the very bare minimum. However, this is not going to give us the desired result, actually. it will absolve us from the obligation of fasting. However, it's not going to take us to the levels that we really would like to reach. Then we have another level of fasting, which is a more holistic level of fasting, where we will fast not only outwardly but inwardly as well. And that will involve a fasting which will be a fasting of the stomach, which is abstaining from food and drink during the prescribed times. Secondly, saving the private parts from sexual indulgence as well. And above and beyond that, also a fasting of the eyes, not seeing what is prohibited to be seen, which is something we should be doing all the time, particularly during the course of fasting. Similarly, the use of the ears, hearing only what Allah would like us to hear, and closing our ears and not listening to that which Allah is not pleased with. The thoughts that we allow to enter into our mind and that we would, sort of process in our minds. So we have to be careful about that as well. Fast from those thoughts of the mind. That I see that some of our attendees are raising their hands for questions. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to just keep your questions. Definitely, inshallah, we would love to interact with the questions and answers. But let's go through the presentation. Kindly keep your questions, write them down if possible, and definitely we'll open up the time for the question and answers after we finish the entire presentation, inshallah. Okay, so again, fasting of the mind. Okay, the thoughts that we harbor in our mind, let's be careful about that. Save our minds, from wrong thoughts, and most critically, protecting our hearts from wrong notions, from wrong thoughts, letting our hearts wander into areas they shouldn't be. So this is the level 2, according to Imam Ghazali, of level 2 fasting, where we would be fasting from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of these respects. And then he goes on to say that there's another level of fasting, which I haven't presented a slide because that's quite far from all of us, particularly myself. And that would be that we fast from all of the creation and just connect with the Creator. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq to move in that direction. And it's mentioned about such people that their iftar or their breaking of their fast will be when they leave this world and their meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That would be their Eid al-Fitr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may bless us as well with something of that nature, something of that characteristic. Well, there's a very interesting hadith. It's a long hadith, and one of the phrases of this hadith is wasumu tasihu, and fast and gain health. So, in other words, fast and you will acquire health. It is something which actually is going to, be health giving, not only spiritually but physically as well. In all, spiritually, emotionally, and in so many other dimensions. Now, if we had a little more time, I would tell you a story with more detail, but I'll just give you the khulasa of this story, the summary. One of our scholars, he passed away, of course, quite a long time ago. I was very fortunate back in the 1970s to accompany him in the United States. He came on a tour, myself and another of my colleagues. We were fortunate to be in his service. And so he told us a story. He was with a Jamaat who were traveling from India to Australia, and actually by the time they got to Malaysia, so he was coughing blood, and he was, really, really, in a serious condition. And so when they got to Malaysia or Indonesia, I don't remember exactly. So they actually had to deplane, and they took him to the hospital for the emergency, and the lungs were full of blood. And actually, they found that apparently he was in the last stages of tuberculosis. And so this guy's not going anywhere, right? And moreover, they said that he's going to have to stay. Even if he lives through this ordeal, he's going to have to remain, hospitalized for quite some time. So now the Jamaat is heading towards Australia. And so what do? Are they going to, cancel their program and just stay there, or what? They made mashwara. They decided they'll continue to Australia. And in the meantime, they will let Sheikh, remain there in the hospital. And if he goes off to Allah's mercy, then so be it. If not, if he regains his health, then on the way back, they'll pick him up again. So they presented that view to him. And since he was such a senior person, he totally objected, and they had to agree with it. They couldn't deny his objection. His objection was that, look, you're not going to let me, die here. You're going to take me with you, and I will proceed in the path of Allah like Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. And he also was very advanced in age, and he told his companions in the Ghazwa of Turkey, that you carry me with him. And actually, he died on the way, and he was buried there in Turkey. So he said, so you have to take me with you, and if I die, bury me there, and if not, then so be it. No, it so happened it was also the month of Ramadan. So he said, not only am I going to travel, I'm going to fast as well. Now in that condition, can you imagine? So he's fasting. So he's fasting, he's traveling, and in that condition. And by the time they got to Australia, now I heard this story from him directly. So I mean, it's not like I heard it in the grapevine. So he says that when we got to Australia, so I was feeling fine. There was no coughing of blood. I said, okay. They took me directly to the emergency room, and they found that the lungs were totally clear. So when we have yaqeen on the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the words of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and ma yantiqu anil hawa in huwa illa wahyun yuha. But Nabi alayhi salatu wasallam does not talk, just out of his head. If he's talking about things which are connected to Deen, connected to, like with religion, this is a form of revelation. So let us have full yaqeen that fasting has fantastic power to heal us spiritually, physically, emotionally, intellectually. It's just an amazing facility, an initiative which was for the very, mercifully has granted us. Fast and become healthy. This is a riwayat of Al-Tabrani. It's a long riwayat. It has very many interesting things. It's not a place otherwise. It's a very interesting riwayat. So one side is fasting, the other side is after we break the fast. So what do we eat? So not only do we need to focus on halal, we need to focus on tayyib as well. This is a concept that perhaps many of us are really not focused, or we never even thought about this. But it's interesting when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba. Halalan tayyiba. Wa la tattabi'u khutuwat ash-shaytan, innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. O mankind, eat of that which is lawful and wholesome. Halalan tayyiban. So many of us Muslims, we are totally aware of the fact that we have to eat halal. But what about tayyib? What does this infer? So tayyib infers it's wholesome, it's good, it's beneficial, it's even delicious, which wholesome and pure natural things are exceedingly delicious as well. This is a great favor of this one as well. So eat which is lawful and wholesome in the earth, and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. Lo, he is an open enemy for you. So we know that shaitan is our enemy. Now, most of the time we are incognizant, or as we say in the ghafla, we're not focusing on this. We need to focus on the fact that we have an enemy that's consistently and constantly, never-endingly trying to destroy us. And so we need to be cognizant of that and prepared, and we have to be on the alert. If we have an enemy that we know is trying to attack us and kill us or harm us at any possible juncture that he finds, we're going to be really on our toes. We're going to be extremely vigilant. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. So the second verse it's also extremely relevant here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. And eat and drink, but be not excessive. Do not practice israf. And israf is actually basically means that you are using something which is halal. It's permissible, but you're wasting it. You're using more than necessary, spending more than necessary, spending more time than necessary, spending more resources or money than necessary on something which is otherwise mubah. It's legal, it's lawful. Now, if we're spending time or resources on things which is unlawful, this is a much higher crime, and that's called tabdir. إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ. And the people who practice tabdir, they are the brothers of shayateen, devils. That's what the Aziz is from that. Indeed, he likes not those who commit excess. So again, let's see what Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentions in Ibn Nawawi pertaining to this verse. It's really amazing. I mean, the man was so ahead of his time. They're just starting to understand, I mean, scientifically, what our ulama and our pious ancestors were talking about centuries ago. So he says, the heat of the body continuously dissipates its moisture. In other words, we have moisture, what we call the rutuba, in the body, and the heat of the body is continually dissipating. It's causing that to evaporate and disappear. So a replenishment of what has dissipated is necessary for the body to sustain. That's perfectly logical. And that replenishment is through food and drink. Okay? However, when food and drink exceeds the amount that has dissipated, in other words, we're utilizing nutrients, we're losing rutubat or moisture in the body. And so this needs to be replenished, but it needs to be replenished to the extent that has been dissipated, that has been used. Okay? Not more, not less. So, however, when food and drink exceed the amount that has dissipated, heat of the body is reduced. It's going to affect the efficient function of our bodies, and its ability to dissolve wastes is weakened. Its ability to excrete toxins and facilitate the process of the elimination of toxins from the body, which is critical. This is going to be reduced. It's going to be hampered if we're going to eat more and drink more than what really should be utilized, which has been utilized. Okay. So these wastes transform, these wastes that don't get excreted, they don't get expelled from the body. These wastes transform into malicious substances, creating havoc and ruining the body, which is what's going on in most of humanity today. I mean, everybody's got these civilizational sicknesses, which is really all boils down to wrong lifestyle choices. It's not about, coronavirus, and it's not about all these other things, these bacteria floating around. It's the fact most of the sicknesses that are going on in the world today, and most of the deaths which are taking place today, are due to wrong lifestyle choices. In other words, we're killing ourselves, right? So these wastes transform into malicious substances, toxins, and poisonous, substances which create havoc and ruin the body, leaving in its wake a plethora of diseases as diverse as the diversity of those substances. Cancers, anemias, arthritis, sugar diabetes, a plethora of heart conditions, cardiovascular situations which are destroying us. Neural conditions, it's destroying the minds and the brains as well. So a lot of this is due to the fact that we don't observe this particular ayat. Eat and drink, but don't perform excesses. So this is all inferred by the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. Eat and drink, and do not commit excesses. Do not perpetuate israf. Allah has guided His servants to replenish the body with food and drink, to the extent that it uses. Makes sense, right? To the extent that it's beneficial to the body in both quantity and quality. Now, it's very critical, not only quantity, but quality as well. What we're putting into the body and how much of that we're putting into the body. This is very critical. So when food and drink exceed these bounds, it becomes israf, it becomes extravagance, intemperance, waste. The deficiency of food and drink or the excess therein prohibit health and attract illness. Okay? So if we're not eating and drinking properly, quantity-wise and quality-wise, that's going to produce problems. And if we're eating excess, we're eating even the best of things. You know? One of our colleagues in Mashaykh, he says health food is junk food on a full stomach. You know, no matter how beneficial the thing is in itself intrinsically, I mean, when we're full, we don't have actually a need to eat it. Things in our stomach, it's going to be detrimental. May Allah help us. So the entirety of the protection of health is therefore contained in these two divine phrases. May Allah give me and all of us tawfiq to understand this and implement it. Let's look at Sunnah. Sunnah also, Nabi Sallallahu points to it. It's just a very simple concept, but such a powerful concept. And actually modern science is telling us, very vividly now. Mamala ibn Adam wi'a'an sharran min batnihi. بحسب القيمات يقمن الصلبة. فإن كان لا محالة فثلث للطعام وثلث للشراب وثلث لنفسه. No son of Adam fills a container worse than his stomach. A few morsels that keep his back upright are sufficient for him. If he must exceed that amount, a few morsels, you can't live on that, which most of us can't. So, what's the limit? Okay, 1/3 for food, 1/3 for drink, 1/3 for breathing. And it's not like you eat until you feel full. If you're going to do that, you've gone way above and beyond that. So we have to actually pull back before we really actually feel full, So moderation, actually, it's all about moderation. Now, also in modern science, modern studies, that point, in holistic health, particularly in these circles, scientific studies, clinical studies that have been undertaken in our recent times, have also come to these conclusions that absence of hunger, being full all the time and not being hungry most of the time, which is how we're engineered to be, these cause most of our deaths today. We're not dying of starvation, we're dying of overeating. So hunger increases actually vitality, energy, brain power, memory. That's why fasting is now a big thing in health circles. All naturopaths are talking about fasting now, but we have a much more broad dimension of fasting and a much richer tradition. But even the physical benefits are now being applauded throughout the world. Freedom of pain, many illnesses, particularly arthritis and things like this. Fasting will do wonders for these things. Boost spiritual awareness and closeness to Allah. We all have probably experienced that. Just see how we feel just before Maghrib, and then how do we feel after Maghrib and after Iftar? What's our spiritual condition? So I think we're all we can feel that to some extent. Hunger renders food more delicious. Food doesn't even taste good when you're full. So be intelligent, adopt means of health before your illness. Eat to live, not live to eat, which is basically what we have today. Make your food fuel for Amal Salih. Sheikh Keller, this is a saying of his. And so that's actually should be the intention. This goes back to the intention of why we eat in the first place. It's the order. Kulu washrabu, as we mentioned earlier. It's the order of us. That's the system. That's the way he's engineered us. Wala tusrifu. Don't eat in excess. So we eat and drink because it's the order of Allah. And through this order, Allah gives us energy, gives us ability to live a life of Salih. So make your food and make your eating and drinking, from this intention, from this perspective. Okay?
Sheikh, kind of just hold it for a minute. The microphone, can you possibly put it in front of you? Or maybe on the desk in front of you. The sound is going and coming a little bit sometimes when you move.
Okay, how is it now? Is it okay?
It's fine now. Also,
okay.
if you wish to put it in front, it might be easier for you. I'm not sure, okay. According to you.
Okay, what I'm doing, I've got it in my hand. Actually, you can't see it in the screen, but I've got it in my hand. So if this is okay, I'll keep it like this. Is it okay? Is it better now?
Okay, yeah. Jazakallah.
Okay. Okay, Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feekum. Sorry about that. Okay. There's so many adab. Adab are the manners or the characteristics that we should adopt. And so in fasting, I mean, there's just so many things that we can talk about. And since our time is very limited, and so we're going to stick with the scope in which we've been talking about. And so again, we'll reiterate that moderation, number one, because generally what happens is, and I'll touch on this a little bit more at the end of the presentation, at the time of iftar and the time of suhoor, it's very critical because we're spending all of this time fasting. We're putting in a lot of effort and a lot of time, and we're making headway, but we can destroy that if when we go against these adab or these proper customs at the time of breaking the fast or at the time of suhoor, the eating before beginning the fast. So let us observe moderation, and that moderation that will enable us to fulfill our obligation. In other words, we don't eat so to such an extent, such a small extent, that it's going to produce weakness, which is going to hinder us from fulfilling our religious and social obligations. And also our mind and our faculties need to remain sharp. So we need that much of nourishment that's going to keep us aligned along those lines. Above and beyond that, just as the ayat that I've mentioned earlier, above and beyond that, that's makruh, that's going to be disliked, both from the standpoint of religion and from the standpoint of science as well. Now, if we see the studies on that, there's an unlimited amount of research that proves this point as well. And another important adab that I think we need to, especially for our ladies and those who are preparing the food, continuous dhikr during the preparation of that food. So ensuring that, we're consistently connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only in the fasting and the eating, but during the preparation. So this is a very critical thing. Some very general guidelines, inshallah. I'm going to give you my contacts, for our various programs that we have. So we go into these things in much more detail, but just general guidelines, which I would, recommend for myself and all of our brothers and sisters. What do we avoid? Just like we say, La ilaha illallah, it's nafi, then ithbat. What do we negate, and then what do we, affirm? So let's first negate things. I mean, what are we not going to involve in? What type of foods are we going to try and avoid this Ramadan and after Ramadan as well? Number one, probably the biggest culprit is processed, packaged, all this, processed food, processed wheat products, processed grains, processed sugar, processed, it's full of chemicals, it's full of preservatives. All of the food value and nutrients have been removed from these things. It's just, it's just bad news. It's not going to help us. It's probably going to be a more detriment than of any help. So processed, packaged, canned foods, all of this kind of stuff. Try and, do without that. Refined starches, sugar, carbohydrates, any of this kind of stuff, particularly refined sugar. Now in Trinidad, you have your raw sugar, which is better than the white sugar, that's for sure. But in any case, sugar should be, controlled. Honey is a better option if we need to have something, something to sweeten our drinks or our food. Your brown sugar is a better option than your white sugar, which is more processed. It has more chemicals in its content. And the processed carbohydrates, like your white flour, your bleached flour, and all of these processed carbohydrates are just about as bad as sugar. So we would like to really, avoid those as far as possible. Okay, vegetable seed oils. Now, this is something that a lot of us may not be aware of, but cooking vegetable oil, okay, it does have nutrients. It has vitamin A, vitamin D, and other nutrients. But once you start cooking with these vegetable oils, the vegetable seed oils, they start changing their chemical constitution. And the result is that they become actually toxic, and they become extremely toxic. The more heat that they are subjected to, the more toxic they become, and they ultimately become carcinogenic, cancer-forming. So this is not a good option to cook, and particularly, in Ramadan, usually people are frying up a lot of stuff, and this is really something we should try and avoid altogether. And if you do have to fry something, we're going to give you better options than these vegetable seed oils that people are using a lot. Okay. The fruits and vegetables sprayed with pesticides. Sometimes this is difficult to find, but if you can, then by all means. People say, well, it's a bit more expensive. Well, it's better to invest in your health than in hospital bills and in doctor bills. Okay, so fruits and vegetables are great, but when they're sprayed, with the heavy toxins, it's not really a great idea. And there are some which are worse than others. And as I said, we go into this more detail in our workshops and trainings, so you can see over there. But as a general rule, try and buy organic. That's all possible. Animal and dairy products, which are synthetically fed, hormone treated. Obviously, animal and dairy are great things when they're natural and they're organic. When they're synthetically fed, they're not fed their natural feed that also sometimes engineers them to take, and they're treated with hormones to advance production, particularly in milk, or growth hormones, so that they mature quickly. So this is extremely detrimental. Particularly in Trinidad, since I go back and forth, I noticed there's extremely high incidence of cancer. And one of the causes, perhaps, one of the major reasons, perhaps, that might be is from the hormone treatment that the chicken, because people eat an extreme amount of chicken in Trinidad. A chicken is great, but that the chicken is generally pumped with these hormones and these different, growth enhancers, which, really cause havoc to the human body. So let's be careful about that. Farmed fish are great. Fish is just a great thing, but when it's farmed just like chicken, so the same problem we have with farmed chicken, we end up having with fish as well. So we're going to show you the other option that we should select rather than farmed. And river fish, like a lot of the rivers are so exceedingly polluted now that unfortunately that pollution is affecting the fish. So deep frying, again, I mentioned that earlier, and the more you fry stuff and the more that oil is cooked generally, and it's generally these vegetable seed oils which become toxic, they become carcinogenic. So we really don't want to do that. And particularly because we are fasting and our stomachs are in like sleep mode. So the first thing that you're going to eat is fried stuff is really, really bad news. So we want to avoid that as far as possible. So what do we eat then? So number one, eat when you're hungry, not for pleasure. Now in Ramadan, you're going to be hungry at the time of iftar. There's no doubt about that. But again, moderation. Let's take it easy, and let's break into it very slowly. And I'll mention that a little bit more when we talk about iftar. So natural organic vegetables, fruits, legumes, great, nothing like it. Natural organic animal, poultry, dairy. People, if somebody has like lactose or casein sensitivities, then that's another story. Otherwise, these are great things, great sources of protein if you don't have issues with them. Deep sea smaller fish. So fish are great, but if we, the larger the fish are, the higher they are on the chain, the more they tend to have heavy metals like mercury and stuff like that because of the pollution in the seas as well. Excuse us, protect us. So the smaller the fish are, then the less they tend to be affected by that. So the farther down there on the food chain, then the less they will, you'll have the problem with heavy metals and those toxins, which are now, unfortunately, these bigger fish like tuna, swordfish, which I'm very fond of, but I avoid these days because of that problem. Fermented organic vegetables, dairy, yogurt, things of this nature, kimchi, sauerkraut, wonderful things, and they're full of probiotics, which are going to aid digestion. They're just all around good stuff. Whole grains, whole organic grains, and if possible from traditional seeds, because now they've re-engineered the genetic, engineering of these grains, which are known as genetically modified, so we want to, try and avoid those if that's possible. A lot of times that's not, because they're just not available. But if you can find your traditional seeds, oats are a better option. Rice, barley, millet, corn, wheat is particularly has gone under a lot of genetic transformation. So if we can avoid that, or if we find traditional seeds, which I don't know if Trinidad or overseas you're going to find anything like that. Here in Pakistan, where I live, we still, it's getting harder and harder to find, but still we find that. Okay, so cooking oil. We talked about seed oils. We don't want to really use those. So what do we use? The natural ghee, clarified butter. It really can sustain the high heat, so it's a much better. It's a much better option. Coconut oil, which you have a lot in Trinidad, the whole West Indian area. So you should avail of that. Coconut oil, unprocessed coconut is a wonderful thing. Cook, you can take it raw. It's just wonderful stuff. Avocado oil. You have a lot of avocado in Trinidad. I don't know if you can get avocado oil, but in America we get it now. So you should be able to find that. Palm oil, if you find good unprocessed palm oil, that's also a saturated fat that holds up better under heat. Olive oil is not as good as the ones that we mentioned earlier, although if you eat it raw, it is full of wonderful things. But once you start cooking olive oil, then it starts to reduce those benefits, and it doesn't sustain heat as well as the ones that we mentioned earlier. Sesame peanut oil are also good options if they're pure, but again, they're seed oils and they will start to change, become toxic under high heat. So all fat and oil, use sparingly, don't use a lot of it, and it's best to cook without oil, especially olive oil, and put the olive oil, the raw olive oil, over your food. It's delicious and it's extremely nutritious, what people still feel. So be intelligent, adopt means of health before you get ill, right? Don't wait till you get sick and then start thinking about your health. I used to walk, I walk every day early in the morning. And then again in the evening, if I have the opportunity, other regimens of exercise that I do. But one of the things is that I'm very particular about walking in the morning. So there was a place in Pakistan where I used to walk, and I used to find all these old guys walking, and I would ask them, why are you walking? And someone would say, well, I had this bypass, I had, arteries all clogged up, and now the doctor says, you have to walk. And so, okay, fine. So another guy says, okay, what's your problem? Well, I've got diabetes, and so the doctors have to walk. Other people have different problems, and so they ask me, well, why are you walking? You don't see that. I said, well, I'm walking because I don't want to end up like you guys. So, take your health, seriously and look after it before you get sick, and then start worrying about it. And keep in mind that our bodies are amanat. It's actually not our, it's not our property. This is what people say now. This is my body. I do with what I want. Wait a minute. It's not your body, by the way. You didn't create it. You're not sustaining it. You're not controlling it. The one who created it, it belongs to him, and it's going to be returned to him. And we're going to have to give account how we maintain it as well. So it's actually an amanat, and may Allah still think to understand that and act accordingly. We have a saying in Arabic, "Al-wiqaya khayru min al-ilaj." Prevention is better than cure. It's much better, it's much healthier, it's much more economical as well. So again, as I mentioned, I just want to give a few tips about iftar and suhoor, and then we're going to wind up our presentation here, inshallah. And then we'll open up for questions and answers, inshallah. Some tips about iftar and suhoor. So number one, as I mentioned earlier, we are now in the course of the day, now we've spent 10, 12, 13, 14 hours of fasting. We have now, undergone a process which is spiritually and physically purifying us, actually, if we're doing it properly. So this process is taking place. Now, at the time of iftar, we don't want to hinder this process, and we don't want to reverse this process. And so it's very critical that what we take at the time of iftar and what we take at the time of suhoor is also critical, and the amount that we take. So our digestive systems are actually in a state of sort of, you can say, something like a sleep mode, like our computers. They need to be woken up. And you don't want to wake them up with heavy, fried and, sugary and oily and all this super hard stuff to digest. It's just like dropping atom bombs in your stomach. You really don't want to do that. So what you want to do is you want to very gently and very kindly wake up your system, and the best way of doing that is following the sunnah of our Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, serving the sunnah in letter and spirit. So Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to break his fast with dates, and if fresh dates were available, then that was the best thing. Fresh dates, which are soft, and they're very, very quickly digested. The sugars, which is about 80% sugar, but natural sugar, it's broken down very quickly in the saliva. It goes right into your blood system, and you get immediate, energy rush from that. But it doesn't have that difficulty of digestion, so it's not going to tax your digestive system. And your digestive system is going to very easily absorb the nutrients, the sugars, and it's going to now take you out of that sleep mode into an active mode very gently and beautifully. I mean, there's nothing that you could actually put into your system better than what Nabi showed us in this practice. These worth of, particularly if you find fresh dates. If you don't find fresh dates, then packaged dates, a date which is dried, actually dates, which we call tamar, is actually totally dried. So this is the next best thing. If you don't have that, perhaps a spoon of honey or something of a very easily digestible fruit, And then what you do is, after breaking the fast, let's say 3 dates and maybe a little water, maybe a little green tea or something like that. And then after now performing Salatul Maghrib and Nawafil and Adhkar, now your digestive system is now, it's kicking back into normal function mode. And you have very nicely and very gently and very effectively opened up your digestive system. And now it's ready to receive a stronger dose of good nutrients. So now after that process of Maghrib and Nawafil, Adhkar, so now perhaps a half an hour or so has gone by. Now, having a healthy, well-balanced, moderate quantity of good, wholesome nourishment is going to be readily and very, very, very effectively digested and be very beneficial for us by the grace of Allah's permission. So let's be very careful about that. How we're breaking the fast, what we're using, and then what we eat, because we want everything that we put into our. We have a very short time to actually eat and drink in Ramadan, during summer months. So everything that we place in our stomachs, it should be of the highest quality and of the most efficient for giving us energy, inshallah ta'ala, so that's the intention. So we need to be focused on that. Suhoor, the same thing. Now, also, at the time of suhoor, we don't want to eat so much that it's like, we make up for what we missed, during the day, in our iftar and suhoor. So again, eating something very beneficial, easy to digest, which is not going to cause indigestion problems, later on in the day, right? And in moderation, and again, looking at, maximizing, terms of nutrients and wholesomeness and being beneficial. And so if we'll look after, I think we're going to find a huge difference. You know, we'll really feel a lot of difference in the quality of our fasting and the spiritual effects as well, if we're very careful and cognizant about the quality and the quantity of the food that we take in iftar and suhoor. I would also strongly recommend that other than iftar and suhoor, we really shouldn't be snapping. You know, kulu wa shrabu, eat and drink until you. It doesn't mean that you have to continuously eat and drink. It means that you are able to eat and drink, and but continuously eating and munching, and this is actually not what is inferred. So we should eat and drink at our appointed times, and try and avoid snacking and having meals upon meals. We have a saying in Arabic language, that eating after eating is just asking for sickness. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. And lastly, I would just like to mention that we mentioned some aspects of spiritual and physical health, but holistic health actually requires a focus on all of the dimensions of human health, which entail ruhani, spiritual health, intellectual health, aqlani, jismani, physical health. We talked a little bit about that today. Nafsani, our emotional health, our social health, our social interactions with one another, our interaction with the planet and the environment, environmental health as well. So I'm going to, the next slide, I'm going to offer you all my contact information and website, Facebook and Twitter pages as well. And we deal with these subjects. We also have workshops and we have programs that we had this, we were going to have a program there in Trinidad. Unfortunately, the situation was such that we weren't able to do that. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to do that. Maybe we'll be able to schedule something like that online, I don't know. But in any case, keep in touch with us. And we have programs and articles, trainings, workshops, etc., where we look into all these various dimensions of human health. So these are my contacts. You can also contact me directly here at this email if you have questions that we can't get to today, for example. We're going to be looking at coaching and mentoring programs as well that we help people, that have taken our courses, continue them along, mentoring them and coaching them. So do contact me, and inshallah we'll try and benefit one another. And jazakumullah khair. So having said that, I think we can open the floor for questions and answers. So how are we going to work that? Are people going to chat in, or they're going to speak in?
Inshallah, they can actually chat. So they can put it up in the chat, and there is a Q&A section as well, but chat seems to be easier at the moment. So whoever wants to ask questions, they can. Sheikh, I just want to thank you. MashaAllah, your full presentation was very in-depth. We can see there's much more to talk about, and definitely something that Muslims need to focus on. A lot of it being, not particularly blaming anyone, but a lot of times we do look at it in a very superficial way. When we live our lives in a very in-depth way, everything becomes meaningful. Every step of your life really does have an impact. I do have some questions coming in already. So I had one come in just now before this first one came in. Okay, actually, Brother Shamid is saying, great session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you both. Would you recommend any light exercise during Ramadan? Maybe after Tarawih?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm not seeing any questions here. So maybe you're seeing the questions. Maybe you want to just dictate them.
Yeah.
How would that work? Yeah, maybe that's a better way. Definitely. A lot of people think, because we're fasting, so, we don't want to do exercises. We don't want to do any physical exertion because that's going to, eat up all our energy, and that's going to really put us. Actually, that's not the case. Excessive, I would definitely not recommend excessive exercise, but definitely do get some exercise, walking, some light calisthenics. For example, my routine is basically push-ups and sit-ups and some pull-ups. I do light resistance band training also in Ramadan. I'm an avid surfer and swimmer, and if that's kind of dangerous. Otherwise, yeah, I would definitely, recommend all these. But definitely, and what happens in fasting is that we tend to get lazy also, because we feel, like a bit, lack of energy. So we kind of chill out, and we just kind of relax, and then we really start, becoming lethargic. Now, this is really unproductive. So I would suggest that every so often, stand up and do, maybe a little running in place, do a few push-ups, do some deep breathing exercises. That's very, very beneficial. Taking deep breaths from the bottom of your lungs, and then all the way up into the top of your lungs, and do that maybe say 10 to 20 times. And so I would definitely recommend, some type of regime that you're doing. And throughout the day, involve in some type of physical activity, because it will sharpen the mind. It will bring you more, and it will make you more energetic, and that will impact your ibadat as well, definitely. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us something. I would also recommend do that early in the day. I would not recommend doing that late in the day, because obviously, you're getting you need all the energy you can find, at that point of time. So probably after Fajr is a great time to do these type of things. Nothing excessive, but definitely I would highly recommend, some type of light physical exercise regime.
Inshallah. We do have another question here. Children likes and dislike food. There's beneficial food, what they don't like. Is it wrong to force them to eat?
Forcing anybody to do anything is really not going to work, La ikraha fi Deen. Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't force us to accept Islam, right? I mean, you have to really, so we have to come up with creative ways to try and, convince them that this is what they would want to do. Now, obviously that sounds, it's easier said than done. But we need to discuss with them. For example, if we talk with our kids, okay, so try and explain to them, if we ate such and such things, let's do a little background on that, Okay, what kind of impact is that going to have on us? Okay, like kids like to play, kids like to do stuff and what have you. So if we're eating bad things, how is that going to impact the things that we like to do? For example, this is off the cuff, and if we're eating good stuff that gives us more energy, makes our minds, more clear, how do you think? Would that be something we want to, that we'd like to have, that we'd like to do? We'd like to have our minds clear. We'd like to have our bodies more able to, function. So let kids, if we can work with kids and get them to understand concepts, and they themselves suggest what they need to do. You follow my point? Yeah. In other words, ask a lot of questions and get them thinking, so that they come up with the answer, not that I give you the answer. Do this, or what do you think? If we do this or do that, would that be beneficial or would that be harmful? What do you think? No, that would be beneficial. Okay, what do you think? Should we do the beneficial? So what do you think? How, should we do the beneficial thing or should? So actually, kids are sharp. So generally, if you give them, open up the floor for them to do their own thinking and come up to the right, facilitate them to come up to the to come to the right conclusions, so that they are doing things because they want to, not because they have to. And anybody that's working, if you're an employer, an employee that's working because he wants to work for you, he's going to be an efficient and effective employee. The employee that's working for you because he has to, he's not going to be productive, and you don't, have a lot of expectation of care from him, right? So try and work with our kids, and in such a way that they come to the conclusions and they decide. And through mashwara, and obviously it takes a bit more time. It's going to take a little more, thought process. But this is what we need to do. And I tell you, because I'm the father of 12 children and around 30 some grandchildren, and I made a lot of blunders in my life. So I learned this lesson the hard way. So yeah. So take my advice, inshallah.
One person attendee is asking wonderful information. Can we get access to the presentation?
Yeah, in fact, what I would like you to do is, I would like to present this as kind of like a gift to everybody. So what you can do is, let me just go to the next slide. Okay, please contact me for your gift. Just contact me at this email address. Probably if you just, I don't know what kind of program you have, but if you just click on that or just take a picture of that, right?
Yeah, I'll put it on the chat.
Yeah, email me and I'll send you a copy of the presentation. Whoever wants one, just send it to me and inshallah I'll send you that presentation. More than happy.
So another one, someone's asking, is it your knowledge? Oh, is it in your knowledge that the 6 feet social distancing beneficial during this pandemic issue, especially during Taraweeh prayer?
Well, to be honest, you know, I'm not a medical practitioner as such, qualified for that specifically. I haven't done the necessary research to give you a fatwa on that, you know. This whole situation is now unfolding. There's a lot of, you know, unknowns here. There's a lot of gray areas, which I myself am looking into very deeply. However, what I would say is that your religious and medical leaders there in Trinidad, I'm sure you have, you know, no dearth of them. And whoever that you know, who is considered to be authorities in these areas, then we listen to what they have to say. Here in Pakistan, our ulama have taken this stance that I think everywhere, I don't know about in Trinidad, but here in Pakistan, the ulama were not prepared to accept this thing because they wanted to shut down masjids and Jummah and Jamaat, everything, totally. And the ulama, you know, categorically rejected that and said, okay, we'll take precautions, but we're not going to shut down masjids. This is not the time to send people away from the house of Allah. This is the time for people to connect with the house of Allah. And taking precautions, you know, now, is this 6 foot? And now someone's saying, no, you need to keep 13 feet. Is this really backed up by science or not? This is a question that I'm still looking into. I'm not totally sold on this whole idea. But in any case, if the authorities are telling us this is what we should be doing, then I wouldn't go against them. Okay. But it's still, there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot we can talk about on this whole situation, which
exactly
right now. But this is an unprecedented situation. And I think it's a time that people really need to wake up, because we are definitely, there's no question in my mind that we are really, really close to the last stage. We're going to, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it not happen in our lifetime. I think, you know, some of these major signs of the end of the time are right in front of us. I think this is some very strong preliminary, you know, manifestations that are taking place. And this particularly, this pandemic is extremely significant. Allah give us all protection and save us. But this is not the time for disconnection. This is the time for connection. And fortunately,
definitely. So I have a one question. A lot of times, even locally, we have a big issue with many people in just majorly just getting a routine in order. A lot of times, the routine is what breaks the cycle. So even in Ramadan, you have all these plans, but because your routine is always all over, it's messed up, it's not happening, it actually breaks the whole flow of events and whatever you're trying to do. So is there any major advice you can give of how to make sure and secure that routine? Because as much as you try, sometimes our lives just take control, and although it's going to be a little bit different now, but it is always a challenge to have that routine in order.
Of course, this is a challenge for everybody, because nafs does not like routine, right? Not only nafs doesn't like routine, but shaitan obviously would not like you to continue a good routine because that's going to be detrimental to his agenda. So to counteract this, what can we do? Okay, number one, what we need to do is we need to be continuously hearing about and pondering, reflecting about the benefits of the routine, a beneficial routine, whether it's a physical routine, whether it's a spiritual routine, whether it's our adhkar, tilawat al-Quran, our adhiyah, our nawafil, our sleep patterns, our eating habits, our exercise programs, whatever they are, we need to be continuously reminding ourselves and reflecting on what are the benefits of doing these things and what are the detriments if we don't do these things, in this life and in the next. If you would like a meditation, we could do a meditation, just close off your mind and your heart and just think about, okay, if I actually live a life according to this regimen, which I've, chalked out for myself, what are the benefits that I hope to achieve? And what would I expect, like a month down the road, a year down the road, 5 years down the road, if I'm given life? What's that going to do to me? How is that going to benefit me? How is that going to serve me? If I don't do that, what's going to happen? We talked about, diet, okay. So I break my regimen and I start eating this junk food or whatnot. So maybe it's 5 minutes of taste, but then, it's 5 years of pain, right? So if we kind of meditate on these things, that's going to, help us. Secondly, we need support. Critical insan wife. Every human being is weak, myself included. We're all human beings, we're all weak by nature. We need the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We also need the help of one another. So support groups or support persons, having a buddy, as it were, a companion who will take on that regimen with you. For example, your wife, you and your wife, or best, is your whole family sit down and talk about these things. And we decide as a family, this is how we want to live our life. Let's come up with a regimen and help one another, and sort of check one another. We can do this with our colleagues. We can do this with our, relatives, colleagues, etc. And then if we find mentors, coaches, mentors, people who, who are doing these things consistently, and they mentor us, they coach us, they help us along with that. We're trying to come up with an online system for that, because this is everywhere. I mean, this is the problem for most people. There's very few people that are actually able to, come up with a regimen and just, chalk it out and stick to it. That's very, very, very. Okay. So those are a few points. And the last point is, look, you're going to fall down anyway. Even though I'm a pretty regimented person, I mean, I've pretty much lived like that most of my life, but we have our ups and downs. I am the same way. We have our times when we're highly motivated. We have times when motivation gets, diminished. So don't take it too hard on yourself. That happens. So when you fall, just get back up. Right? Don't make it the end of the end of the chapter. So if we find ourselves falling, or slipping, so let's get ourselves back up and get back in the game, right? Like the kid learning a bicycle, he falls down. So what does he do? He doesn't stop. He gets back on the bike and he keeps practicing. So if we keep falling down, we keep on getting up, and then ultimately we get better. And inshallah, with the tawfiq of Allah, we'll move ahead. And then obviously we have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq. Ma tawfiqi illa billah. So it's not going to happen without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tawfiq. So may He give us all that special kind of tawfiq with us. I hope that helps.
Jazakumullah, that was really beneficial. There's one other comment here. Taking medications during Ramadan should be taken when, if possible, or make that time to take the medication without avoiding to fast. So I think it's just a general comment. So medications, I guess, depends on the situation, and that would be according to each issue and each person to know what types of issues they're having, and if they need to take medication before, after, or during the actual day. So I guess we can skip that one. We do have one more great presentation, mashallah. This presentation was very beneficial, and hope you do another presentation, say once a week, inshallah, building on this lesson. May Allah reward you greatly for your service. Online presentation weekly will be appreciated. So, Sheikh, I know definitely whenever you can again, we would hope that you can join us again. One of the things that I'll mention though, Sheikh is in Pakistan right now, so the time difference is really big for us. So getting the right time is always going to be an issue. This time does work though. I don't know if it works for you. Maybe during the month we can have another session.
This time is good. This time works well. This is okay.
Great, alhamdulillah. So I think that's it. I don't have any more questions coming in. So if anyone else has anything, you can put it in, inshallah, and we can ask Sheikh as we're closing off.
Exactly. So as I mentioned, just take note of my email address there, so you can send me an email, and whoever wants the presentation, just kindly send me an email and want the presentation. I'll be happy to send it to you. If we have other issues, anything else you'd like to ask or something like that, then inshallah, if I have something to say, whatever the small Allah has given me in understanding, I would be more than happy to share with all of our brothers and sisters. Jazakumullah khair for giving me the opportunity. I accept it.
I mean, Jazakallah as well for you being here. It was something definitely we were anticipating. As the viewers might have known, Sheikh was coming for a session, and he was unable to come because of the same coronavirus and the lockdown, the closure. It was actually 2 days, I believe, before they closed the airports. He was supposed to come in, and thereafter he couldn't continue in his trip. So, mashallah, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But something we definitely want to have again. When you're here, I hope everyone who's attending and who's going to be looking at this program can anticipate that time, inshallah, when you do return to our shores and we can benefit from you. We definitely want to hear about that surfing, because we would really want to accompany you in the surfing, inshallah. And we do hope that you can stay with us as long as possible and continue to guide us. Jazakumullah khairah. So we'll close off here now, inshallah. And again, until we meet again, I'll do encourage everyone to email for that presentation, and we will email as well. So if anybody can't get in contact, we will definitely help them through, inshallah. Jazakumullah Sheikh, and I think this should be the end of our session.
Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.